Raising the Bets is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets, a family podcast of pirates and penguins. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, our adventures near and far, as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture in lockdown. I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
So we're back, and as we're sitting here, we're recalling what we've been doing this past week that we wanted to talk about, and I'm pretty sure, even though it was in last week's notes to talk about, we didn't talk about Mother's Day.
Which I don't understand how we could have skipped.
Because there's a lot else we talked about.
I guess.
So,
are you sure we didn't talk about it?
Well, I didn't go back and listen to the episode again, but I'm pretty sure we didn't talk about it. Let's talk about it anyway.
Okay.
Because I think I recall, like, even as I was editing it last week, saying, I thought we didn't, I guess we didn't talk about that. Anyway, so what did we do on Mother's Day last week? Do you remember? Okay, so let's talk about, we've talked about how we're pretty low-key about big events.
But last year, actually, I had one of the best Mother's Days ever.
Yes.
Because last year, did we talk about this on the podcast yet? I don't remember if we were doing it last year, this time of year. Anyway,
yes, we were
year,
not. We were not.
Last year, I took a day out all on my own, and after Mass, I went and got on the train and went into Boston, actually into Cambridge, and I went to the Harvard Museum of Art, which I'd never been to before, and it was fabulous. And then after that, I went and I got some pastries, and I went to a bookstore, and then I wandered around, and then I ended up treating myself to dinner at the brew pub, and then I got on the train, John Harvard's brew pub.
Which is no longer there.
It's no longer there? Oh, that's really
closed.
sad.
That is very sad.
Oh, my goodness. And then I got on the train and came home. So it was a very long day out and about, and it was very nice. It was a great treat. This year, obviously, all of that was off the table.
You couldn't do any of that.
The museum is closed. The brew pub is closed. Well,
Cambridge is closed.
Cambridge is pretty much closed. The pastry shop, maybe I could have got takeout. I don't know. But it would not have been worth the hike.
Trekking into Boston to wander around an empty city.
To wander. I mean, it might have been interesting, sort of in a post-apocalyptic sort of way.
It's the introvert's paradise. I can see you dancing down the street.
Actually, there's a part of me that really just wants to get in the car and drive around Boston, like
gawking at the emptiness.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of fascinated. Like, I've seen the drone footage and everything, but I kind of want to get in the car and drive it.
I think some of the, I mean, it's certainly going to be less than usual. I don't think it's as dramatically empty as some of the footage.
I suspect the footage was probably like Sunday morning at like
right, or edited to have only the most barren shots.
Right. Yeah. I figure that, but
because you can see that sort of thing, like
but that's kind of why I want to. That's kind of why I want to drive around. Right.
I've heard that there are a lot more speeding tickets being given out and high-speed accidents in the city because people are like, woohoo, I can drive at top speed.
Are you serious or are you making that up?
No, seriously. There have been more high-speed accidents in the city of Boston because people
aren't used to driving at high speeds in the city?
Because usually it's 3 feet, stop, 3 feet, stop. So yes, they've actually been talking about that. So what we did do is after watching Mass, which is the new lexicon of life.
Yes.
So I gotta stop for a second because I don't think we discussed this. This is the dangers of doing these podcasts every week is because unless you keep very detailed notes, you forget what you've talked about from week to week. The experience. Some people are very much. You can only watch live streamed Mass. That's the only real. That's like not like it's the only valid one because none of this is the real thing. But for some people, they will only watch live streamed Mass because that's the only one that kind of counts in their mind.
It doesn't feel real,
right?
If it's recorded,
right. Whereas we watch the recorded Mass, Cardinal Sean, that he records on Catholic TV on Saturday evening, and then we watch it Sunday morning on YouTube.
Right.
And I think we did talk about this because I mentioned how Jimmy Aiken said, I brought it up to him, and he said, "Well, look, when you from a physics point of view, the mass is already delayed by the time you watch it, even if you're in the same room. Speed of light. What's going on the altar is delayed.
That seems tendentious to me.
Well, but it's a principle. The principle is if watching it delayed by an hour, how is that different from watching delayed by a millisecond?
I think a better argument would be like, so if you're at like a big mass at the Vatican, and you're
way in the back.
You're way in the back, and you're mostly just seeing it on the big screen because the Pope looks like an ant
there
up there.
There are people who will say that's not really
going to mass.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess the question is, like, how far back do you have to be? Like, at what point are you too far back for it to really count as mass? Like, there's got to be some. If at the very back where you can only see it on TV isn't really count.
You know what I'm thinking about right now?
What?
Life of Brian, Monty Python.
I don't know which scene you're
There's a scene
about.
where they're at the Sermon on the Mount. And the people in the back.
People in the back can't hear.
What did he say? I can't hear him. He said, "Blessed are the pizza makers." Oh, pizza makers, they're nice people.
I thought it was cheesemakers.
Well, then they're like, no, it's cheesemakers. Oh, really? It's all purveyors of dairy products. It's like, no, it's peacemakers, you idiot, and they go on and on.
Right.
So, blessed are the poor. Oh yeah, the poor. They're nice people. They should get a little something.
So we're way off track from talking about Mother's Day.
Hey, look, the point, there it goes. So Mother's Day, we decided, and I think you decided.
I decided.
You decided. You didn't want to be cooped up in the house. We don't do a big deal for Mother's Day. That's one of the points I was trying to say, is we don't make a big deal out of it. You don't want all the presents and all that sort of stuff.
But I did want to sort of do something
to mark the day.
Yeah, and an outing in place of my fabulous outing from last year. I decided that we knew that our favorite coffee shop that we usually go to when we go to the farmer's
coffee shop. Let's go make some Xeroxes. Woo!
Our favorite coffee shop where we usually go either before or after the farmer's market is still open and doing business. And they're right on the water in Hingham. And I thought, that sounds like their coffee is the best.
Yes.
And it's right near the water. So it's a very pleasant drive down there. And I thought, a pleasant drive, get some coffee, maybe like wave at the beach, maybe even park at the beach if the parking lot isn't closed, and then come home. That sounds okay.
Right.
So that's what we did.
So we got there. The kids were a little like, do we bring masks? Should we wear a mask? When do we wear masks? They really haven't been masked up. Like, when you've taken them to the parks and stuff like this, they're out in the woods. It's far away from people. We don't really worry about the masks so much. But this was more close in. So they were a little concerned about the whole mask situation. None of them got out of the car except for Bella at one point with you. But so here's so it was very interesting how getting the coffee worked. When I went to the coffee shop, there were no tables and chairs. They take them all out except for there's this big family style central table, and that's still there, and that provided the traffic flow. And so you walk around, and there's the counter, and there's a table in front of the counter with a payment thing on it, and so you keep that social distance, and you order, and they usually, like most good coffee places, you put in your own milk and sugar and whatnot, and they're like, nope, we're doing it for you. And so, do you want milk? Do you want sugar? Yeah, whatever. And so you always get the decaf latte with enough sugar to choke a horse.
Yes, exactly.
Add a little decaf latte to some sugar. And
I'd like some sugar with some coffee and some foam. Foamy milk.
So I said, sugar in the latte, extra sugar, and it
was perfect.
It was better than I usually do it. So
it was perfect. It was one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had. So there you go.
So then you're supposed to go outside. You go out the door and you stand outside. And they have this window, this regular window that
this is not a service window.
Not usually a service window. And they have this barrel outside. And so when it's your turn, they open the window and put your coffee on the barrel, and they close the window and you come and claim it.
Yes.
It was very strange, but life is strange.
Life is very strange.
Life is strange, Highness. Anyone tells you differently is trying to sell you something. That's going to come up later. So then we went from there over to the Hingham Bathing Beach, it's called, which is a very old-fashioned name.
It is. I love it.
And it was open, and there were people there, and you and Isabella got out because the others did not want to get out of the
Did
car.
not want to exit the car.
For whatever
It was a very breezy day. It was
Well,
not. It was not hot. It was not.
It wasn't so much, I think, about the weather, about the masks, as it was about the weather. But you and Bella got out and went for...
We went for a very short walk on the beach.
That was the picture on last week's episode, was the masks, you and Bella wearing masks.
Yes, but we didn't talk about it.
But we didn't talk about it.
That's weird.
That is weird. Anyway, it was in my mind to use that. But so we... So that was Mother's Day, and then we came back. Did we have anything special for Mother's Day dinner?
No, I think we just had Italian sausages and pasta or something.
Yeah,
it was something pretty
something
plain
on the grill,
Jane, ordinary.
Yeah,
not very exciting.
Yeah,
that's okay.
So the other thing we did this week that was big and out of the house was because this is what we do nowadays. We have parades for celebrations, and my nephew JohnPaul graduated from Providence College this May and was commissioned. He was in ROTC, and so he was commissioned into the U.S. Army as a second lieutenant. And they had a virtual commissioning ceremony via Zoom, which all Zoom events now are just, they have little disasters through them.
Yes.
There's the unmuted microphones, and you have this very formal ceremony. You have generals and all these important people, and one of the cadets becoming a lieutenant, his family, he forgets to mute his microphone, and somebody in his family is dropping F-bombs and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, mute the mic. And, but it was, they had the ceremony, and so my brother and his wife planned a surprise, a parade for him. And so we all gathered, family and friends, about 40 cars, which was pretty awesome, including, since we're all big Catholic homeschooling families, a bunch of big vans, and my other brother, Bernie's truck. And when I say truck, I mean semi. He's a truck driver, and he has his own semi, and so he led the parade in the big semi.
No trailer on it, just the semi.
No, just the semi. Yeah, he drove without the trailer. And we had a police escort. My brother arranged a police escort. And we all gathered at the mall down the street and then processed together like a big funeral procession, with blinkers on and everything.
Yeah, it kind of felt like a very weird, happy funeral.
Anti-funeral. It was an anti-funeral procession.
Right.
And I'm sure people were wondering. And there were American flags and people that decorated their cars with bunting and, congratulations. And so my brother lives in our childhood home, and it's on a circle, so it goes around. And so the plan was he would be out front of the house with his grandfather, my sister-in-law's dad, for the formal first salute. And there's a tradition where you choose who will give you your first salute as an officer. And so he chose his grandfather, and they were going to do that out front, and so they're out there, and there's a big banner my brother made. Congratulations, JohnPaul, second lieutenant, U.S. Army, and so as we come up the hill, and there's some great videos. My brother Bernie's in this truck, honking the horn like a train's coming through. He's like,
it was loud.
All the neighbors are out in there,
and everybody, and then all the other cars started honking too.
All the neighbors are out, they're watching it, and we go up the street and past the house, and you kind of slow down and you wave, and then you go around, and then we go around the block, and you come back around. We did two circuits.
We did 3 circuits, I think.
No, we did 2 circuits. Well, we did a third circuit to leave. You had to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But we did pull over and stop for a bit, and we got out. The family stopped and got out, and
not the friends. The friends all went home.
Yeah, but we kind of gathered in, socially distant groups.
Family clusters, 6 feet apart.
Yeah,
or more.
And we got to take photos with him, which is he's on one side of this big bush in the yard, and we're on the other, under the banner. And one of my brother's friends built a giant cardboard helicopter. He's going to be a helicopter pilot, my nephew. And so they built a giant helicopter that they put on the roof of their car. It was
a really cool helicopter.
It was big. I'm like, Chuck, if you made it just a little bigger, you could have put it over the car and around it.
And his name stenciled on it and everything. Yes. It was really cool.
Yes. Chuck was a former U.S. Army officer.
I think I knew that.
In the 10th Mountain Division.
Right.
In Somalia, I think, back in the day. So, but yes, so that was fun. That was a blast. It was fun,
and the best part was really getting to see everybody face to face, not through a screen.
I know. I haven't seen my
for
family.
the first time since Christmas?
Yes,
I think.
Yeah, I mean, usually we see everybody like between Christmas and Easter. We don't get together a lot because there's not a whole lot of going on, but from Easter through the summer, we get together a lot more. My brother has a pool.
Like every few weeks, it feels like we get together.
We see everybody. We see my mom more, my mom and my dad more, but like my brothers and my sister, we hadn't seen. And so it was nice to see them in person.
Right.
It was,
kind of weird because we couldn't actually like go up and hug anybody, but...
And my dad is a hugger.
He's a kisser.
Yes.
Like you get the Sicilian kiss on the cheek.
Yes. And like my brother kept telling Dad, sit down. Dad, just sit down.
I know.
Because, he's in the...
he's also very old-fashioned, and if a woman comes into the room or into his presence, if he's sitting outside, he will always stand up to greet her. Like, this is your dad.
This is my dad. So...
Yeah.
We had to, it was awkward and weird and like everything else is these days, but it was great. It was a blast. So much fun. Today, as we record this, is May 17th, Sunday, May 17th. 20 years ago today.
Yes.
My nephew JohnPaul, well, my brother and his whole family were in Rome on pilgrimage for the millennial year, the holy year. I'm trying to remember the Jubilee year, and because my brother worked for the Archdiocese at the time, they got an audience with Pope John Paul. So it was May 17th, 2000, which was the day before Pope John Paul's 80th birthday. And during that audience, each of the kids got to greet John Paul. And when my nephew, JohnPaul, the one who had his commissioning on Friday, on Friday. He sort of leapt into the Pope's arms. And there's this picture that a news photographer took that was plastered all over, and it's on our wall right here in front of us. And it was plastered all over the newspapers throughout Europe the next day, because the next day was the Pope's birthday, of this hug the Pope, now Saint John Paul, was giving him. In fact, I might try to put that as the album art, or the episode art.
That would be great. John Paul with John Paul.
Yes, a beautiful picture. But I thought it was significant. It was 20 years ago, literally 20 years ago today, as we talk about it, and so it's actually Pope St. John Paul's 100th birthday.
Right.
Yeah. So that was,
and then we also have a child who shares a birthday with Pope St. John Paul.
Right, and that's the next thing we're going to talk about. As you hear this is you'll hear this after the event, but on Monday, May 18th, it's Isabella's birthday. She's turning 14, which is, like all parents say, hard to believe.
Very.
And it's beautiful to see how she's growing up and becoming her own person, and she's very mature. I think she's very mature for her age.
I think so.
Yeah, she's still 14. She's still she's becoming, the shedding the childhood and moving into adulthood, but what are we doing for her birthday?
Well, she's very sad on one hand to not be able to go out.
Yes, our tradition is, as if you've listened for any length of time, is that the child whose birthday it is gets to choose where to go for dinner for their birthday. Although I don't know how long we're going to keep doing this, because as they're getting older, they need to have adult meals. It's getting expensive.
It is. But
it might end up being like a child and a parent, or a couple of children and one of the parents, or something like that. But so the child chooses where to go.
Yes.
And her choice would have been
Bertucci's,
the Italian restaurant chain, which it's a regional chain around here, but we can't, obviously, because everything's closed. So instead, we're going to do takeout. We will take out from Bertucci's. Grubhub from the Bertucci's. This is the world we live in today. So we'll do Grubhub from there for dinner instead, which will be fine. You're going to make her cake.
Yes, she's requested a lemon cake.
A lemon cake. Good.
And I also made her some cinnamon buns for breakfast.
Cinnamon buns for breakfast.
I figured, to try to help make up for the disappointing fact that we're only going to have dinner at home.
Yes.
Takeout does not feel as special. So I figured to bump up the specialness quotient of the day, I made some cinnamon buns today.
You were a good mom. And what do we get her for her birthday? I kind of feel like we got her a lot of stuff.
There was a whole bunch of books, obviously.
Yes, there's always. It wouldn't be a Bettinelli birthday.
Yeah, a Lego set, like a cool Star Wars Lego set.
Y-Wing.
A Y-Wing.
Which was requested.
Right. What else?
Dress?
Yeah, I think a couple of dresses, like Land's End dresses, some nice, pretty ones.
Some stuff from your parents.
My parents sent some stuff. But I'm not quite sure what.
Yeah, those are still in their boxes.
I feel like there's something else and I'm not remembering it.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to tell next week when we've opened everything and remembered it. Oh, it's a surprise to us. You'll be wrapping them after we're done anyway, so.
Right. But she already got one present early from her grandparents, which was a really nice set of headphones.
If you'd like to know which headphones they are, you can listen to Secrets of Technology, where it was your mom's pick of the week when we did that. In case you don't know, Melanie's mom is one of the rotating panel on our other podcast, Secrets of Technology.
Yes.
And she picked it. It was
Isabella is currently taking lots of online classes, as we've mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And so these, she says, are much better than the little ear pods, which she was using before.
Yes. These are nice. They're Bluetooth, but you can also plug them in. They have a built-in microphone and such. Yeah, they're nice headphones. So that's good. Yeah. And one of the things that comes up with that, with turning 14, is Melanie brought this up. I hadn't even thought of this. Is she's old enough now, by legal reasons, to have her own social media accounts. Like, she has a Google account that she uses to take her classes, and for a while now she's had a small circle of really the children of your friends,
right,
who are from social media, who are kind of scattered around the country, and that she's connected with. I think initially it was like a book group.
There was a book club, which sort of never really got around to actually reading a book and meeting.
But they communicate.
But yeah, what brought it up was I have just joined on Facebook a local birdwatchers club.
And Bella is obviously.
And Bella is my bird watcher, and she's huge. And I was thinking, it's kind of a shame that I'm mediating this and I'm seeing the pictures and she's only seeing them when I come up and say, hey, come over here, look at these pictures. And I was thinking it'd kind of be nice if she could just like have her own Facebook account and just to look at the pictures of birds. She would really like that, and communicating with other bird watchers in the area. That would be kind of cool for her. And then I thought, well, but I'm not sure we're ready for the whole like being on Facebook,
being on social media.
Right.
Yeah, I gather most kids her age, they get social media accounts because they're communicating with other kids from school or and other places like that where they're on social media too, and this is how they connect with each other. And although most kids, again, her age, are not on Facebook, that Facebook is not a thing for them. It's Instagram or other things, or WhatsApp or other, which is not really social media, but it sort of is.
Yeah, I know very little about most of those.
Yes, I've tried to keep up with.
I am an old fuddy-duddy.
You are, and I think Instagram is actually as a social media for keeping connection. It's pretty good because it's mainly visual, and it doesn't divert into a lot of these crazy topics that Facebook and Twitter do. But in order to do the thing that you're talking about being in the local birders group, she would have to be on Facebook. So I don't. What do other people do? I'd love to hear what if you, the listener, have experienced this and done this, what you've decided and how you handled it. Because I'm not sure what to say.
Right. I'm not really sure. Like, do I feel really comfortable like
she hasn't asked
on Facebook? She hasn't asked, and I almost kind of want to do sort of a unless you ask.
On the other hand, it's something that I think it's one of those things that kids need to have an experience of before they get out into the world.
Oh, definitely. Like the question is not if, but when. Because to me, I think that learning how to navigate social media while still having parents around to help you ease into the process is important. Just like we teach our kids how to use like gaming by giving them time to play games within a set limit so they learn how to sort of pace themselves. Self-regulate.
Yeah. Well, and yes, there are lots of lessons that I'm prepared to give her on safe social media and all that sort of stuff. That's a given. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't want her to be one of these, awkward homeschool kids who go out into the world and are completely like babes in the woods, like lambs led to the slaughter.
Yeah, I actually had a college roommate friend whose parents had not let her watch any television ever when I was in college. And
this is well before the internet.
Well, it was not well before the internet, but yeah, a few people on campus had email addresses.
Yes.
I was one of them.
There was AOL and CompuServe and that sort of stuff, but right. Yes, this was early days.
So way back when in the dark ages.
Yes.
She had never seen television shows that like everybody knew, and she did spend quite a bit of time sort of binge watching.
Back in the day when that was not even as easy as it would be today.
Right. But she had a hard time like self-regulating and like doing her work for her classes when she really just kind of wanted to catch up on all the TV shows that she'd like everyone else knew about that she'd never heard of and seen. And it was kind of hard for her to figure out how to do that.
Someday I'll tell you the story about the MTV Road Rules marathon during finals one year.
Right, which doesn't mean to say that like other kids on their own for the first time don't also have similar problems.
It was similar in that we'd had MTV when I was a kid, but I never really watched it. Like, and I wasn't into the non-music video shows. And so we didn't have cable at school until my last year when we had a roommate who moved in who wanted cable, so we got it. And suddenly, I'm like, what is this? MTV Road Rules. This is kind of cool. They're on the road, and it's...
I've never seen an episode of MTV Road Rules.
I mean, it's early reality TV. It's like Survivor, right. Except no one got voted off. Yeah. So I was like, wow, this is interesting. I'll watch an episode. It's only a half hour.
Uh-oh. How many hours later?
12.
12?
I don't know. I don't know if it was literally 12 hours, but it was very distracting. Because like, what happens next? And it wasn't like streaming where you can pause and go away and come back and pick up. It was on TV, and you had to sit there and watch it. If you missed an episode, you missed what happened. That wasn't a disaster, but it was. I don't want to visit it on her. So if you've gone through this with your teenagers, and I'd love to hear how you handled it and what you thought of it, and what happened for you and lessons learned. That would be much appreciated. So let's move on to what we've been cooking and eating lately. You mentioned you made cinnamon buns and cake, but also last week you made one of the things that the supermarkets have been a little bare of variety. Like we've been able to get enough food to eat. That's not been a problem.
Right.
But sometimes what you get is sort of what they've got available. And sometimes, so meal planning has kind of gone out the window.
Yes.
And so mealtime comes around. It's like, what do we got that I can make something with? And you came up with a last minute sort of, I've got stuff, let's make something of it. Soup that was really actually really good. We both agreed.
I mean, I've made potato soups before.
Yeah.
So, and it used to be actually more one of my standards, and then we hit the dairy allergy, and I stopped making it quite so much because I really like creamy soups.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we were sort of down to the dregs, and I was tired, and I think there was something in the freezer that would have required way too much prep, and I just didn't feel like messing with it. And so I'm thinking, I've got some chicken stock. I've got some potatoes. I've got heavy cream. Let's go. And I had some scraps of ham in the freezer and some deli ham that was sort of on the verge of turning to the dark side.
Dark side ham is no good.
Ham. Dark side ham is bad. This was not yet slimy.
Pork Vader.
Yeah. So yeah, I did a sort of mirepoix of carrots, onions, and celery, except it's not really a mirepoix because it's the ingredients, but I like a slightly bigger dice and a kind of chunky soup.
Mm.
And then lots of white wine and chicken broth, the ham, and lots of butter and cream. It was really good.
Yeah, and even the next day, like better.
Oh, and I'd also had made some sourdough. I think that was what tipped me over is I'd made the sourdough, and I really wanted some soup to dip it in.
Right, and another sourdough. We talked about the sourdough stout, chocolate stout bread, but this was
This was just a
regular sourdough,
regular plain Jane sourdough.
Like I had some this morning. It was still tender and good.
You know, it's kind of funny because sourdough does not have oil in it, and yet I've noticed that they actually stay pretty moist.
Yeah, they don't dry out as quick.
They don't dry out, and I'm wondering what the chemistry is. Like, why does sourdough not dry out as fast?
Yeah, it doesn't go stale like regular bread does.
As other bread.
Yeah, interesting. Well, the other thing that we made this week is that they actually happened to have at the market when you went was ribs. So, and I mentioned we made St. Louis style ribs a couple weeks ago, and so I made some more. That's the nice thing about working from home is that you can make midweek ribs, and so I smoked it on the grill, and I used the recipe from America's Test Kitchen. I think it's Cook's Illustrated, but it might be Cook's Country. They have a couple different magazines. But one of the things I want to the recipe for the ribs themselves is good, and but the barbecue sauce that they have with it is okay. But it's a little too sweet.
It's too sweet.
Because not only does it have molasses, but it also has brown sugar. What was the other thing that was
ketchup?
In it? And ketchup, which has a lot of sugar in it. And so it's too sweet. I like a tangier.
Barbecue sauce should have a little sweet. I mean, definitely molasses should be one of the flavors.
Definitely.
But yeah, I don't think this was too sweet.
I need to find to find a better barbecue sauce recipe, one that's more Texas style?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, look, I'm asking.
Come to the Texas side.
Well, because one of my favorites right now, for like bottled, is from Tennessee's Barbecue here locally.
Which
it's called Tennessee's Barbecue, but I don't know if it's a Tennessee style sauce.
The sauce, well, it's not exactly Texas style sauce.
Yeah. I'd be curious to it's theirs has chocolate in it. Remember, Anthony was reading the ingredient list.
I did note that, which was interesting.
Yeah, so maybe a little cocoa powder in that would be good.
I'm a fan of cocoa powder in like chili, so I can see it in barbecue sauce.
Yeah. I might do some more experimentation. There's a lot of barbecue sauce that it makes a lot of barbecue sauce. So I got a big thing of it in the fridge, but
you could make less.
I could. Well, I could. I was afraid to. It was what the recipe was, and then I remembered that last year it made a ton extra that was in the fridge, but it's there. I mean, it's not bad barbecue sauce.
No, it's passable.
But I want to perfect it. I want to get better at it. One thing I did this time was that I used the immersion blender to really liquefy the onions. There's a lot of onion in it.
Yeah. Barbecue sauce should not have chunks of onion in it. That's just wrong.
Yeah. So it's smooth enough.
I think I'd skip the onion, honestly, because I think that's adding some of that sweet profile.
Right.
Because they're Vidalia onions, which are pretty sweet anyway.
Right. That's sweet on sweet on sweet.
Yeah, I think the onion,
or just even maybe half the onion, because I do like the onion bite in it.
Maybe.
And there's not much cider vinegar.
What about onion powder instead of like that would add some of that onion flavor?
Would add the onion flavor without adding the sugars.
Right.
That's true.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? There's some cider vinegar in it. Maybe you could bump that up a little bit.
A little more vinegar. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. There's also Dijon in it, which actually didn't have the Dijon. I had the stone ground mustard.
Dijon might actually add a slightly different flavor profile.
Yeah. So if you've got a really good barbecue sauce recipe, I'd love to hear from it.
Yes.
So let us know. bets@sqpn.com. But I'll remind you at the end of the episode. So let's talk about what we've been reading or watching. Let's start with watching. You've been watching a new show at the recommendation of your friend Kira that you've been telling me about.
Yes, The Night Manager. I think I talked yesterday about my TV drought.
Or last week.
Last week, not yesterday. I don't know. Time is an illusion, lunchtime doubly so. Yes, The Night Manager is a classic spy thriller based on a novel by
John
le Carré. I've never read any of Jean le Carré's.
No, Jean.
John. I have a hard time not saying Jean with le Carré. I mean, come on, right? John le Carré. So it stars Tom Hiddleston as the night manager.
Loki from the
No.
Marvel Cinematic
It's also
Universe.
got Olivia Colman in a law enforcement role. I don't remember what her specific role is, but she's law enforcement of some kind or other. I think it's like some sort of weird independent MI something.
MI6, MI5. The manager of an FCO task force.
But I don't even know what that means. Like, there's lots of initials and stuff. I have no idea. Anyway, and then as the villain, Hugh Laurie. Oh my goodness, he's like the evil arms dealer. I like him a lot in this role. I haven't seen Hugh Laurie in a lot, so to me, he's Bertie Wooster, and it's kind of surreal to see him as a villain. And, anyway, it's a great show. So far, I've seen 3 episodes, and so it starts off with Tom Hiddleston as the night manager for a hotel in Cairo during the Arab Spring Revolution.
Right. The Arab Spring. Yep.
Right. And he has the girlfriend of an arms dealer staying at the hotel, and he gets a hold of some like top secret information about an arms deal that's going on, and he gets it to a buddy who works for the embassy.
Okay.
It turns out that he's former British Army, I think. So he's got some like Army background, and so he's tough. He's a fighter, and he's patriotic, and he wants to stop the bad guys. And somehow this, like, over the course of time, morphs into him getting recruited by Olivia Colman to infiltrate the arms dealers organization to take him down.
And so it's a limited run series, just 6 episodes?
Yeah. I think that there's I think I saw something about maybe a season 2, but so far, like, season 1 is just 6 episodes, so I'm halfway through.
There is not a season 2.
No, I think I saw it like in something about maybe
They got to do one?
like upcoming season 2 at some time in the future.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know. I could be wrong.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, so.
Right. I could be wrong, but I think when I was Googling it, I found something.
Okay.
Anyway, I like it. It's fun. It's violent. It's got some graphic content, like sexual content, of course.
Because everything does.
Par for the course, everything does, but not like incredibly over the top. It's kind of what you'd expect, like from the sort of movie, and not like Game of Thrones level.
Right.
It's not super gratuitous. It actually has kind of a place in the plot, sort of. I mean, you could probably have done without it, but
it does say that a second season has been commissioned by the BBC, and it aired in the U.S. on AMC. Where were you watching it?
I want to say Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
All right.
Which means you could probably rent it even if you don't have a Prime membership.
Right. Usually you can pay for that.
Yeah.
Cool. That sounds interesting. That sounds like something I'd watch.
Right. It sounds like, I mean, it feels like something you'd watch. I really, all I knew was my friend said, "Oh, you should watch The Night Manager." And I really didn't even know what genre it was. So I'm like, I wonder what kind of thing this is. And then I watched the opening credits sequence, and it's got lots of like champagne bubbles turning into bombs, sort of that style.
Like it's sort of a James Bond sort of thing.
It kind of, actually, the opening credit sequence reminded me of James Bond mixed with like the opening credit sequence for The Crown.
Oh, see, I haven't seen The Crown, so yeah.
It's got like jewels and stuff.
It did win Emmy Awards and 3 Golden Globes for Best Performance to Tom Hiddleston, Best Performance for an Actress in a Supporting Role to Olivia Colman, who we both love.
I like Olivia Colman.
We both love
a lot.
Olivia Colman.
She's great.
And Best Performance for a Supporting Actor for Hugh Laurie. So,
and they deserve it. I mean, these are great performances. It is really a good show.
All right. You've convinced me.
You should watch it.
So we together watched a movie, classic movie, The Princess Bride.
Which you almost don't need to watch, because how many times have you seen it?
Oh my gosh, I know.
I can practically recite.
I barely took notes for. So we were watching it because there's an upcoming episode of Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, another podcast, which we'll be talking about Princess Bride. I talked about that Shelley Kelly and Mike Dens. Shelley is a super fan, by the way, of Princess Bride.
Like even more than I am?
Puts all of us to shame. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Hands down, no questions. Super fan.
Okay, then.
But the thing I love about it is just how many things from that movie I quote the movie in everyday life.
Yes.
When someone's leaving the house, have fun storming the castle. You think they'll make it? It will take a miracle.
I tuck the kids in at night saying, I'll most likely kill you in the morning. They think it's horrible, but,
yes.
They go along with it.
Good night, Wesley. Sleep well. Almost like I kill you in the morning. Hello, I am Inigo Montoya. You have killed my father. Prepare to die. I did my top 10 quotes, like quotations from the movie. Missed one key one. I forget what it was, but they pointed it out to me. I missed the never go up against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
How could you? You're the Sicilian.
No
how
kidding.
could you forget that?
And I barely scratched the surface of quotable lines from the movie. It is just one of the most quotable movies of all time.
The first time I watched this in the theater, it was Christmas break, and my cousin Jason was visiting from, I think they were living in New Jersey at that point. And my best friend Leslie and my cousin Jason and I went to the theater, just the three of us together. And they had both seen the movie once before in the theater. And this was sort of a drag Melanie along because we can't believe that Melanie hasn't seen this movie yet. And so I'm sitting in between the two of them. And they're both like snickering and giggling and like whispering to each other in advance of each line. Oh my goodness, it was torture. I'm like, stop. But
or even better when they tap and go, oh, watch this.
Yes, exactly. It was like, oh.
I never do that.
Yeah. But I mean, I love the movie, and I'm glad I saw it with them because it made it fun.
I never saw this in the theater. Totally missed this. I didn't see this till like 3-4 years after it was out.
Oh my goodness!
When I was at Steubenville,
lost opportunity.
Well, I mean, that was the funny thing is at Steubenville, people would go, "You haven't seen X? Okay, movie night."
Right.
So that's how I watched. Sorry, Married an Axe Murderer, Princess Bride, The Quiet Man. Like all these movies I'd never seen. Like you were horrified when before we started dating that I'd never seen Casablanca.
Right. How can you have not seen Casablanca? I mean, come on.
I saw The Godfather for the first time last year in preparation for a podcast.
I was shocked. I was shocked when we were engaged and that you had never seen The Godfather. I said, "Oh my goodness, how can you not have seen The Godfather? You're Sicilian for crying out loud."
I lived The Godfather.
Not really.
Well,
but really.
But without saying too much, my dad and his friends, yeah. My dad knew some people that we would spend Sundays at their house when I was a kid that my dad did some work for. So anyway, moving on I'm not sure any of that the statute of limitations on anything has run out on any of that yet. So maybe I should move on and talk about something else we talked about. So yeah, so we did watch The Princess Bride. We also watched the pilot episode of a new Amazon Prime series,
which we probably will not be watching any more episodes of.
Yes, called Upload. And the reason we watched it was, well, a listener, asked if I'd seen it and kind of warned me about it, so I was prepared before watching it. But it's right in sort of in our wheelhouse, which is it has to do with death and the afterlife. It's sort of like I want to say a raunchier version of The Good Place, which was a great series. The Good Place was an awesome series, and we've done several episodes of series of movies and TV shows on The Good Place. So Upload is basically, it imagines this future world where at the moment of death, you can choose to have and most people choose to have their brain uploaded into a virtual environment, which is your permanent afterlife. And in one sense, it's an interesting commentary on because it's not perfect. Like people have this imagination where this idea that it's this perfect existence, but it's what if your apps, like your freemium apps, wherever you have to pay for everything.
Right. It's kind of like today's tech. Like the main character gets an avatar that's kind of like sort of like him, but it's
glitchy.
It's based on a couple of photographs, and so like the hair kind of sticks up, and it just kind of looks a little plasticky. And
yeah, the hair stuck up actually on purpose.
Well, yeah, I know,
but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
but the like when he wants to get like drink out of the mini bar in his amazing room where he lives now, it's that's an additional purchase, an in-app purchase. Like, so you've got in-app purchases, you've got...
Well, and also it feels like the virtual world is pretty limited. He's stuck at a resort in the mountains
Right.
for eternity.
Right. There's no
There's no outside world. There's just this resort.
And the frame rate is there's too many people in the system, so the frame rate is glitchy. Like online games.
Yeah.
It's
like being stuck for eternity in a not very good.
And I think
virtual reality game.
They were building this other part, this storyline, this B plot about this woman who works for the company that runs this upload experience. Her dad is dying and doesn't want to be uploaded. He wants to go to the real afterlife. And, oh, that's so old fashioned. How can you do this? And so I could see where this could be a good concept, an interesting exploration. The problem is they just indulge the worst juvenile impulses. There's just in the first episode, I think there's 2-3 graphic sex scenes, right? I think it was at least that, and potty humor and some they just kind of ruined it. It could be that after the first episode they kind of got that out of their system and they get better. Frankly, a lot of people ding Game of Thrones for way too much graphic sexual content, but after the first couple seasons, I think frankly when the actors got a little more control over their characters, there was a lot less of it. It didn't go away altogether, but there was a lot less of it. There was a lot of violence still, but so maybe it does in this, but I'm not going to find out. I can't recommend it. Put it that way.
I thought the concept was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
It could have been done well. I wasn't convinced that this was the vehicle that was really going to explore the concept well.
There were one or two characters. The woman who worked for the upload company, who was sort of the guardian angel, quote unquote, seemed to make an interesting character. There was somewhere that character could go. The lead character, the guy, I didn't find him all that interesting. It's played by not Robbie Amell. No, Robbie Amell. Stephen Amell is his brother. He was in another movie I talked about recently on the podcast. The one where in the world where superheroes were sort of like illegal immigrants or downtrodden minority. Yeah. So he's been doing a couple of different things. So I just didn't think his character was all that good or interesting.
Yeah, he's kind of
a jerk for one thing.
Right. I'm guessing that the plot line is going to be jerk reforms, becomes a nice guy, or realizes why he. Yeah.
Which is what they did in The Good Place with the Ellen Shellstrop character. I'm not going to spoil that at all because you really should watch it unspoiled. But she starts out as being this kind of jerk, and it has, she develops as a character. Let's just say that.
Right. Yeah, I'm fine.
I just don't think they're doing that as well in this. Not in the first episode. Yeah. So, not a recommendation. Although I did make some progress because it's taking me for. I sometimes come across these old TV shows that other people have watched, and I come to them way late. Like I watched Breaking Bad after it ended. I binged it online, and oh wow, this is awesome! Breaking Bad. Have you seen Breaking Bad? 3 years ago.
Right.
So I've been slowly watching Vikings.
I still have not. I've seen the first episode, and I realized I was not in the mood for this TV show at this point.
It is an interesting show with interesting characters.
I've heard that it gets better in the second season.
It does. And but the storylines are somewhat drawn out, and so you have to kind of commit to it. And if you wait too long between them, like I have, you're like, what's going on? Oh, yeah, that's right. But it's still really good. I'm enjoying it. I kind of want things to pick up a bit, though. So we'll see how it goes. I find the period of time that they're dealing with, though, fascinating. It's really the advent of the medieval era, of Christendom, is really going to start to come into its own. The medieval Europe as we imagine it, as we recall it. At this point, England was not England. It was a series of little kingdoms. Right. Mercia, Northumbria, Wessex. These little kingdoms have not yet been unified in one country. And the Danes, the Norsemen, are still raiding and not yet settled as a presence in England. The Saxons become a big part of the land, and There's this whole subplot of this one, the King of Wessex is fascinated by these Roman ruins. He has no idea who these Romans were. They'd lost the records. They didn't know who they were.
I think by that point they actually should still have known who the Romans were.
They kind of knew that these people were there, but they don't know the details. He's like, he finds this Roman bath with the murals, and he doesn't understand what the murals depict. They're the Roman gods, but who are these Roman gods?
Right. Oh, okay, I see. Interestingly enough, this is sort of the same period of time of the novel I just finished reading.
This is my segue for you.
Beautiful segue.
Thank you.
So I just finished reading a novel by Rosemary Sutcliffe, who wrote beautiful historical fiction for kids. So it's a juvenile novel, but it's not simplistic or talking down to kids. Her novels are really sophisticated for juveniles, but they're easy to read. So anyway, this one is called Dawn Wind, and it's sort of loosely a part of her Roman Britain sequence, which stretches all the way back to Bronze Age Britain, and I'm not even sure what the most chronologically recent is. But there's a whole series of, I think, 9 novels that follow the fortunes of one particular family, starting with Roman Britain, the Aquila family. And you start with a centurion who comes to Britain and ends up staying in Britain, Marcus something Flavius Aquila. In any case, Dawn Wind is generations later, and it's about a boy named Owen, who is British Roman. He thinks of himself as both British and Roman. He speaks Latin and Britain, which is a Celtic language at this point. Mm-hmm. And his father and brother, as the novel opens up, have just been killed by the Saxons. And Owen is on his own. He wanders around the countryside for quite a while, and then he ends up as a Saxon slave, a thrall. And it's a really fascinating look into the clash of cultures, the Britons and the Saxons, at a really interesting time in history. And as the novel ends with St. Augustine famously coming to convert the Saxons.
Augustine of Canterbury?
Augustine of Canterbury.
Right.
Who converted King Ethelbert. Ethelbert's wife was Bertha. I think Bertha?
Yeah, Bertha.
Yeah. She was a Frankish princess, and she was already Christian, and he had been tolerating her Christianity. And Rosemary Sutcliffe's theory is that he sort of wanted to become Christian and had actually maybe even invited Augustine to come. And then the whole thing was kind of stage managed. In any case, it's a really good novel. I really loved the characters. I loved the plot, everything about it. It was one of my favorites of her novels.
So since you asked, the chronologically latest book, the last book in the chronological series is called The Shield Ring, which takes place during the Norman rule of Britain.
Right. I've read another of her Norman Britain works, which is Knight's Fee, which isn't technically part of the same sequence, but she's got a lot of the same recurring themes. She wrote very prolific.
She's incredibly prolific. She would have like a couple books a year coming out.
Yeah. And they're not, like, the quality is such that it's really hard to believe that she was as prolific as she was.
She was writing fast.
Right.
It is amazing.
And so far I've read The Eagle of the Ninth, The Silver Branch, The Lantern Bearers. I just finished Dawn Wind. We read Sword Song aloud as a family with the kids, and we read Eagle of the Ninth.
As a read aloud.
Right. Sword Song is great. It's a Viking novel, actually. Speaking of Vikings. And I've read some of her other books. Warrior Scarlet is her Bronze Age novel, and that's really excellent. One of the things, there were sort of recurring themes in Rosemary Sutcliffe's book is that really the history of Britain is a history of waves of invasion.
Yeah.
And so even during the Bronze Age novel, what you have is a society which is made up of sort of an earlier people and then the newcomers, and the earlier people are now the slaves of the newcomers. And this is the pattern that you see over and over again. Right. A new wave of invaders come, they take over. The older people become sort of a servant class.
But the newcomers almost always become part of the culture. Like there's
an enculturation where they sort of take on characteristics of the local culture. And so there's a blending of cultures rather than an imposition of culture.
Right.
Which is one of the kind of fascinating things. Like the Vikings end up speaking English.
Right.
And the Romans started to think of themselves as British, and they intermarried with the Britons. And so then you get like the character Owain, who thinks he's Roman and British.
Because the Britons were there before the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes, right?
Right.
And then then the Angles and Saxons were then conquered by the Normans. And that was the last wave, really. Until now, when in fact you have a lot of people from India and in Middle East and Poland who are coming in.
Right. Which is kind of an odd sort of wave of colonization, because they're sort of following on the British Empire's colonization.
As the empire collapses, people moved to the center. Some people wanted to stay in it, in a sense.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I really like Rosemary Sutcliffe's world building, and there feels like a unity through her novels of theme and characterization. What was I going to say? I lost it.
Okay.
Anyway, I highly recommend read Rosemary Sutcliffe. Give Rosemary Sutcliffe to your kids. They can be kind of intense, but there's nothing that's not really okay for small kids in them.
Good recommendation. All right, and so let's wrap things up with the last bit we want to talk about. So, as usual this week for Mass, we watched the Mass from Holy Cross Cathedral in Boston, as we said, celebrated by Cardinal John. And for this week's Mass, the readings, let me just pull them up again, were the Acts of the Apostles, where Philip the deacon went to Samaria to heal people and to spread the gospel. But he had a lot of healings that went on there. Many signs and wonders. The second reading is 1 Peter 3:15 to 18. Always give a reason for the hope that is in you. Or be ready to give reason for the hope. And then the Gospel of John, from the Last Supper discourse, where Jesus talks about, I will not leave you orphans. I will send you the Holy Spirit. And so Cardinal John kind of was talking about how they were dedicating this Mass to people who work in the medical professions, including the support staff, custodians and those people, drivers who all help in that profession. But the Mass was dedicated to them. And he talked about how the Catholic Church, and some people may not know this, the Catholic Church provides 1/4 of the world's healthcare facilities. I mean, stop and think about that. 1/4 of the entire world's healthcare facilities, and 2/3 of the healthcare in the developing world. And he says this isn't just tacked on to the Church's ministry, because it's integral to the Church's ministry.
He said that, in fact, if you read the Gospels and the context of Jesus's preaching the gospel is his ministry to the sick, his healing,
right?
And that's.
He spends more time in the gospel healing people than almost anything else.
Right. So that's always been sort of a mission of the Church, is to heal, to take care of the sick.
Right. And in that way, to bring the love of Christ to others and to spread the gospel. And in fact, the Church's many, many, many millions of people have become Christian through their experience, through encountering the Church in these healthcare ministries, which is
right.
Which is especially relevant today, given things. And he also talked about 1 Peter 3:15, which is one of my favorite favorite Bible verses. He says, it says, "Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to give an explanation to anyone who asks you for a reason for your hope, but do it with gentleness and reverence." Which you can't ignore that last bit. But I like this, always be ready to give an explanation to anyone who asks you for a reason for your hope, which is an interesting concept when you think about it. Why do you why would you have to explain why you have hope? Because we live in a world that often doesn't have it. Like, people often don't have hope. They just live in their day-to-day life, and especially back in those times, perhaps there might not have been much hope. There was mortality rates were high, and it was there wasn't much hope for improving your lot in life.
You were born to the class in which you were born, and you probably weren't going to get out of it. Exactly.
And there was a lot of fatalism. There was a lot of the religions of the time. You lived at the whim of the vicissitudes of the gods. If Zeus decided to be a little crazy that day, he would, all the Greek stories, all the Roman pantheon stories always had tales of the gods just being kind of jerks.
Arbitrary and capricious?
Yes, arbitrary and capricious. And so what made Christians different is we have a calmness, a hope, a surety in the assurance that God loves us. We don't just serve God. We're not just his slaves. God loves us. He loves each one of us completely and totally, is in love with us. To die for us. He became one of us. And that's what sets Christianity apart. And so people see this in us. They should see this in us, this hope, this attitude in us. And it should be enough where they say, where does this come from? Why do you have this hope? But the trick is to always reply with gentleness and reverence. And that's a key. I'll tell a little anecdote. Back when I was in college in Steubenville, I lived in a house. We were all philosophy and theology majors. So we were all, big brains who thought we knew everything about our faith. And one day, this guy came to the door. He was a Baptist missionary. He didn't know what he was in for, going door to door in Steubenville. And, he's like, he wants to talk about, do you know Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior? And I'm trying to talk to him, and I'm not doing all that great. And one of my roommates, I won't say who it was, came in. He's a big brain. He knew all this stuff down pat. And I'm like, oh, hey, so-and-so, come talk to this guy who came to the door. He wants to know about such and such. He's a Baptist missionary. We'd love to. And what my roommate did was, which he didn't mean to, but he buried the guy in verbiage. He saw it as an opportunity to, clash the swords of the intellect. And this guy wasn't there for that. He wanted to share something deeply important to him. If my roommate had perhaps approached it, now this wasn't a sharing to a non-Christian the gospel, but if he'd shared his faith with him with gentleness and reverence, he might have had a much different outcome. And immediately, the Baptist guy, kind of very quickly made his excuses and left. There was not much of an exchange. So my roommate, quote unquote, won. It's not a contest. You don't win anything by shutting the other guy down.
I have to say, I am really, really bad about talking to strangers about matters of faith.
Everybody is. I mean, it's the rare person.
Some people seem to be good at it.
I think it's the rare person who feels comfortable at it, who feels good at it. But the way to do, I mean, I don't often get a chance to talk about my faith to people that you'd be surprised how little I do that. So when it happens, it's uncomfortable, and I feel like I'm on the spot. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but if you do it with gentleness and reverence, and that's one of the things I think that like Pope Francis has been talking about is he talks about let's not do proselytism, and proselytism is sort of this: we're going out and we're conquering souls. There's sort of an aggressive way of evangelizing. And you say, no, gentleness and reverence. That's what St. Peter talked about. So keep your conscience clear so that when you are maligned, those who defame your good conduct in Christ may themselves be put to shame. In other words, you will have such a great reputation that no one will ever believe a bad thing said about you.
I think one of the readings this week, actually, that I was reading with the kids, said something along the lines of, if you're going to suffer for the faith. Don't suffer because you did something bad.
That's the next verse.
Right.
It is better to suffer for doing good, if that be the will of God, than for doing evil.
Right. Don't suffer because you broke the rules.
Right. Don't suffer because you exceeded your mandate, for instance, from Christ. Right. So I don't know. It feels like a call for us, but it's also, I also apply this to online interactions, especially even with other committed Catholics, people who are very strong. I really had in the recent years tried to dial back my wading into controversial issues online, because I find that I tend to, it's very easy. I tend to get into these situations where it becomes heated and rancorous and not gentle, not reverent, not very loving. And what good does that do? Oh, I beat you with these verbal, sparring match. Have I changed anyone's mind? Probably. I don't ever remember changing anyone's mind on stuff like that. I mean, it's rare. It's more heat than light, and I'm not sure it does anyone any good to wade into these things online like that. I mean, it's one thing to have interesting discussions about stuff, but again, gentleness and reverence. That's I just want to throw that out there.
I like that.
Yes. And I like how Cardinal Sean said that he calls the first letter of Peter the first encyclical, which is great. All right. So let's wrap it up there. We do want to take a moment, as we always do, to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Raising the Bets, including Claudia S., James K., Alfredo B., Ed B., and Mary V. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue Raising the Bets and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. So what did you think of our discussion? Do you have any advice for us on social media for our teen and getting her involved in that, or a better barbecue sauce or anything like that? You can let us know by commenting at sqpn.com/bets. That's BETTS. Or the SQPN Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to bets@sqpn.com. Relevant links for our discussion, including links to those books and the shows we recommend, will be in our show notes on sqpn.com. Until next time, I'm Dom Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Bets on StarQuest.